Yo, what it do, family? High value basketball. We are back once again with the best basketball commentary on this side of the planet. You dig? Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Go ahead, lock it in. Hit the button, family. Hit that button. Hot take, y'all. 2 games into the season, I'm already going for it. We got to talk about it, man. Have y'all noticed Paul George? Man, Paul George is looking halfway decent. And when I say halfway, I am talking about the Kawhi Leonard effect that is taking place on this team, and more specifically, that's taking place with Paul George. When we talk about Paul George, man, he's had a very interesting and very highlight-ready career. We know about his Indiana days. He was going toe-to-toe with LeBron. He was darn near an MVP, candidacy in one of those years. Things just didn't pan out in Indiana because of Miami. And then he went over to OKC. Over there in OKC, he had a very interesting run again. Another MVP almost level season, partnered up with Russell Westbrook. Of course, that flamed out. And now he is with the Clippers, where he is, for the most part, faring at a similar level. We know the huge flame out that they had in the bubble. But an epic return to form that he's had since then, and were almost finals bound if it wasn't for a Kawhi Leonard injury. So the illustrious career of Paul George is actually pretty darn good. The man has, a great feel for the game. He's got the dribble hezzy pull-up that everybody needs to see, and he can dunk on anybody. So Paul George definitely is that guy. If you haven't watched my video where I did the top 10 shooting guards in the league, you should watch that. He is placed rather high on the list. I won't give it away. You gotta watch it to see. But other than that, man, the point of this video is to actually talk about Paul George remaining a starter and Kawhi Leonard coming off the bench. Now, I know on the surface that sounds utterly insane. There's no reason for Paul George to start over Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard historically is a better player. And he's essentially the thing that the Clippers need to get over the hump so that they can be a legitimate title team, because Paul George can't do it himself. But hear me out for a second. When I say that the Clippers should lean into Paul George more than they should lean into Kawhi Leonard, it is definitely not because Paul George is a better player, but there are a handful of factors that do play into it. One is availability. Paul George is a much more available player than Kawhi Leonard, as we have seen on his time with the Clippers, and overall career-wise, Paul George has been a way healthier player. He only had one injury scare that wasn't even, the type of injury scare that you think is going to affect him long term, because it's not ligament style damage. And it was a freak accident when he snapped his leg in half. And for those who don't know, bone breaks can heal and become stronger, and you actually can potentially become stronger, as opposed to ligament tears, which can, derail your whole daggone career. So he didn't do any ligament damage to his body. So because he doesn't have ligament damage and bone tissue connective damage like Kawhi Leonard does, he can be on the court more often. And because he's on the court more often, that helps the second thing for the team, which is continuity. Continuity is somehow, some way being completely destroyed and just thrown out of the window with these teams. I don't know if it's coming from the organizations or it's coming from the players, because we're in the player movement era. But regardless of whichever, a lot of these teams are ending up being no good or underperforming because they keep swapping out 7-8 players on the team. They keep swapping out the whole bench roster. They keep swapping out all of their support players. We also have superstars, leaving and going to new teams all the time. So when you have a team that doesn't have continuity, it is very hard to reach higher levels of success in the playoffs, because it's those little subtle things that that you learn about when you play with a player for a whole season, for 2 seasons, for 3 seasons, where you can do things to manipulate the offense more, manipulate defenses and things of that nature, because you can play off of that person instinctually. You've gotten hand gestures figured out. Y'all know how to do little eye fakes and head fakes, and there's certain secret codes when you put your hand over here. Like, there's so many different tiny things that can be figured out by just continuously playing with a player or teammates that help build up those things in those crunch time moments. That if you're always in and out of the lineup, in and out of the roster, it disrupts all of that. And we've seen that with the Clippers. The Clippers really have, for lack of a better term, folded because once Kawhi Leonard goes out, the rest of the team is no good. Now, that's not an excuse, because that's basically every team. If the top player or the second to best player goes out, the team is going to fold. But I'm simply saying more so about the superstar effect. We're talking about the psyche of players here when I get into this, because think about it. If you're a second tier player, if you're a bench player, if you're a rotation player, you already know that you're leaning on your superstars. You're leaning on your starters. You know where you at. You on the bench. So if you know that your superstars are leading the way and leading the charge, that gives you more confidence to go out there and execute. It gives you more confidence to be who you need to be and put your contributions out there. But if you notice the leader of your team is out there sweating and nervous and biting his nails and he losing it and he going lemon booty, then you are going to either go lemon booty yourself, or when you get out there, you're gonna be like, man, I got this, man. I can't believe this joker, man. This fool ain't got the juice. And then you're gonna try hard. You're gonna try too hard, and you're gonna press because you don't think anybody else can get it done, because your leading guy can't get it done. So you get thrust into a situation that you're not ready for, whether, like I say, either some type of jealousy get back, or just simply your lead player is sinking, and you like, well, if he's sinking, crap, I'm scared too, because I know I ain't as good as him. And then you get thrown out there, and then you start clinking shots, and now the whole team is falling apart. A similar thing takes place with Paul George, which is the third point. And it's the weirdest point, because Paul George, if we haven't figured it out now, is an emotional kind of guy. He's a little bit of a fragile superstar. He's a part of this fragile superstar era that we live in. And that's not a shot at him. The man is clearly an NBA, great. He's clearly better than me. I'm not chopping the man down. I'm talking about in comparison to other eras. We live on a kid gloves era. It just is what it is. These AAU dudes, they're pampered from the moment that they've figured out to be a potential star. So if you're pampered your whole life, you do get a little soft in certain areas. So it is what it is. But the point is, with Paul George has been a leading man his whole basketball career. He's been a leading man in college. He's been a leading man in Indiana. He was a pseudo leading man in OKC because the play style of Russell Westbrook was different. He's a point guard, so he can, defer to Paul George and let Paul George score and be a scorer and finisher. But when we get to the Clippers, we see that his role is duplicated with Kawhi Leonard, and it is also duplicated at a higher, more consistent level. I'm gonna just say in a slightly more consistent level. He is a few points better than him on the chart. So because Paul George is now playing with a player that's better than him, it's messing with Paul George subliminally. It may not actually mess with him, as they say is, I'm the number one and not Kawhi, that kind of thing. But it goes back into what I was saying earlier. If Paul George puts himself in a position to defer to Kawhi, who he may think is better than him, if and when Kawhi cannot show up, as we saw like in the bubble, then Paul George can't then show up, because Paul George has a propensity to little brother himself. When Kawhi is out there doing Kawhi stuff, Paul George kind of fades a little bit. When Kawhi is out there making highlights and getting steals and just being the Terminator that he is out there, moving so stealthy and stuff like that, Paul George kind of fades back a little bit. He starts chucking shots a little bit. He doesn't look for his shot anymore. He doesn't get to the basket with the same type of focus and intensity. He plays off. Either it's because he gets comfortable because Big Brother is out there, or because just psychologically, he just isn't as sharp because he's not the main person holding the ball. He's not the main guy. He's not the guy with the expectations on his back. When we saw Kawhi Leonard go out for a whole season, Paul George was the guy with the expectations on his back. He had to put the cape on, and he flew. He flew. When Kawhi Leonard came back in these first 2 games, and of course, tiny sample size, but I'm seeing the exact same mentality with Paul George. When Kawhi Leonard got out there, he started to defer. He's just giving the ball to Kawhi. He's just letting Kawhi shine, letting Kawhi get his minutes. Now, of course, especially in this instance, it could be let Kawhi get back into his rhythm because he ain't been out there. It's real easy to write it off. But the same lackadaisical lack of attack that I said earlier, I saw it again against the Lakers. The man only scored 15 points. And the reason why I know it's a thing, because the next game they played against the King, the man put up 40 when Kawhi didn't play at all. Kawhi was not present, and the man put up 40. And if you go watch the highlight tape, the confidence level of Paul George is through the roof. He is going up there, heat checking, hezzy dribbling, pull-ups. He's all behind the back. He over here dunking on fools. He's just going for it with no regard and no remorse. He does not keep that same intensity when Kawhi is on the court with him. He falls back. And that's the point here. If the Clippers want to get the absolute best utilization out of all of their players, because this applies for him, but also everybody else, because this is one of the deepest rosters on the team. There is a problem where if you got so many people on here, everybody can't get a chance to play. So if people aren't getting a chance to play, they don't get a chance to get into rhythm. They just simply don't. And so the gift and the curse of having such a squad that's literally 14 men deep, some of these dudes may get on the court and they will just brick shots, or they'll be out of rhythm, or they won't be able to, be sharp and fit into the rotation, or their defense might be lapsing because they're not getting the minutes that they need. And also coincidentally, if they're leaning on Kawhi and then Kawhi just continuously ends up out of the lineup, it messes up the continuity and it messes up the confidence of the team because their Superman is not in the game. Like, man, we ain't finna win, man. We ain't even got our best player, bruh. Like, what's going on, man? But if you relegate Kawhi to the bench because of all of the history, because of his non-leadership style, him being, a quiet terminator, and it's not even necessarily a problem, but if your best scorer and your best, let's say your best leader scoring wise is not also the leader of the locker room, that can be a weird kind of situation. Generally speaking, the most successful situations are when the best player and the best scorer is also the leader of the locker room. Considering that Kawhi is not that at all, and Paul George has to step into that. If Paul George can be able to step into it on the court and in the locker room, it can help stabilize everybody's emotions on that team. And I say this lastly because at the end of the day, I do believe this can work because Kawhi Leonard can make it work. Kawhi Leonard does not need the number one head spotlight. Kawhi Leonard does not need everybody talking about him. Kawhi Leonard does not need everybody greatly leaning and depending on him. We know this because of his playing history. He played and won a championship with the Spurs leaning on Tim Duncan. He played in Toronto and he was the lead guy, but what did he do? He left because he wanted superstar help with Paul George. Kawhi Leonard is okay with deferring. So because Kawhi Leonard is okay with deferring, I think the Clippers should continue to keep the deference going. Allow the deference to go to Paul George, let him actually be the number one, and then bring in Kawhi to terminate everything at the end. That's how the Clippers should do it. High value basketball. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Peace.